Hi, and welcome to Cal Periodical. I'm Cal, reporting periodically on all things music, film, and culture at large. This marks the first official episode of the channel, and what better way to start things off than a good old-fashioned ranking list. Today we're going to be counting down on my favourite albums of 2021. My intention was to get this done and out a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately I fell foul of COVID, so I spent a week or so in bed. And naturally I didn't feel much like talking, much less like being on camera. Still not 100%, so apologies if I sound a bit nasal as well. For as far back as I can remember, I've loved rounding off the year with a best of list. I actually went on a full-on archive dig last year and managed to unearth at least a top 20 list for every year going all the way back to 2004. As you can imagine, some of my teenage placements were pretty ridiculous.
Maximo Park's second album better than In Rainbows, anyone?
Maybe there's another video in that somewhere. In 2021, I listened to some 275 albums released that year, a personal best for me. I didn't set out to do that at the beginning of the year though. In fact, I was kind of hoping to get back into some old favourites and finally check out some old classics that I was unacquainted with. I did a little bit of both, but in general, the allure of new releases was too much for me. In the end, it was very difficult to wrestle it down even to a top 100. The full list can be found on my Medium blog, which I'll link in the description. Today though, in the interests of time and brevity, I'll just be looking at the top 50, with the first half run through in brief, and then a little bit more about the top 25 in the latter half. In my opinion, it's been an absolutely phenomenal year for music, so I'm really excited to celebrate it. Before we dive in, a few honourable mentions that genuinely physically hurt me not to be able to fit into the top 50. So big shout out to Brockhampton, Vince Staples, Black Midi, Madlib, Sufjan Stevens, Dean Blunt, Flying Lotus, Stephen Fretwell, Bicep, and The Arms. All fantastic albums, very much worth your time. So, without further ado, here's the top 50. At 50, a punk-like hip-hop nightmare unlike anything else this year, Playboi Carti's Whole Lotta Red. At 49, equal parts depressing, hilarious, filthy and nihilistic, the inimitable Arab Strap returned with As Days Get Dark. At 48, a real rising star blending emo sounds with rap flows, Kenny Mason wowed on Angelic Hood Rat Supercut. 47, responsible for getting me excited about weirdo British indie music again, is Squid with Bright Green Field. At 46, the cinematic and electronic menace of Throwing Snow's Dragons, an essential listen for any fans of John Hopkins and the like. At 45, my major rock revelation of the year, Hometown Heroes, Brighton's own Tiger Cub with As Blue as Indigo. At 44, somehow worth the long build-up, the outrageously sexy An Evening with Silk Sonic from Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars. At 43, electrifying unholy noise for End Times that made me wish I'd listened to them sooner. It was Lowe's Hey What. At 42, R&B royalty bursting with passion, attitude and an unforgettable voice. It's Jasmine Sullivan's Ho Tales. At 41, shaping up to be one of the best producer-MC team-ups of recent years, Boldy James and The Alchemist came back together again with Bo Jackson. At 40, the dizzying joys and gentle majesty of having a newborn child perfectly captured by Cleo Sol on her album Mother. 39, a real rapper's rapper, Matt Comey, released two genius projects this year with Pray for Haiti and Balance Cho, which I'm sneaking in as one entry there. At 38, Hit Boy and Nas teamed up again with a sequel to last year's Return to Form on King's Disease 2. At 37, upending everything we thought we knew about the band, Idol's unpredictable Crawler renewed my love for them. At 36, on which my most played song of the year appeared, with Life Is Not the Same, The Singular Sadness of James Blake, Friends That Break Your Heart. At 35, Slow Tie showed us another side to his righteous rage, with a multifaceted and riveting Tyron. At 34, assisted by guests More Mother, Koji Radical and Joshua Idenhen, the scorched earth jazz of Sons of Kemet, Black to the Future. At 33, produced entirely by the amazing Navy Blue, is Half God by Wiki, which furthered his unique New Yorican perspective of the Big Apple. At 32, poet, comedian, viral Vine personality and trans woman, Left at London, released the totally unique This Is a Protest for Your Heart. At 31, it's IDK, You See For Yourself, continuing my long, patient wait for the rest of the world to catch up with him being the next big thing in hip-hop. Number 30, Self-Esteem, Prioritise Pleasure, post-Yeezus soundscapes and gospel pop flourishes from a Sheffield gal and future legend. 29, funky upbeat rap with lush instrumentation on Don't Go Telling Your Mama by Topaz Jones, for fans of Anderson .Paak and Fonte. At 28, still impossible to pin down, JPEG Mafia with LP, more experimental and angry than ever, but still irresistible. 27, Conway the Machine's La Machina, a stunning display of branching out for the MC, dallying with more modern production sounds to thrilling effects. And 26, Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders and the London Symphony Orchestra conjured a spiritually cosmic atmosphere on Promises, which just continues to reveal itself. Okay, on to the top 25 albums of 2021.
25, Deacon by Serpent with Feet.
The very existence of an album like this in 2021 felt like a triumph amidst the darkness all around us. Coming in at just under half an hour long, it was all too fleeting, but so sweet while it lasted. A majestic celebration of black, gay love at its most honest and intimate. It felt like being invited into the most private and delicate setting between lovers. There was room for platonic love as well, though, on single Fellowship, whose chorus, "I'm thankful for the love I share with my friends," felt so poignant now more than ever before. The whole album feels like a heady summer evening, drunk on the whimsical minutiae of being in love and being free.
24, Smiling with No Teeth by Genesis Owusu.
Sometimes an artist comes out with a debut album so fully formed in sound and character that you have to check twice to see if they're not already a megastar. Australia's Genesis Owusu totally pulled that off in March this year, with the record bursting at the seams with personality and musicianship. Pulling from artists as diverse as Kendrick to Death Grips, Prince to George Clinton, it's a thrilling melting pot of inspirations and ideas. It could all fall off the rails if it wasn't for Owusu's cool songwriting, which covers themes of depression and ostracisation, with lightness of touch and inimitable swagger. After Smiling with No Teeth, there'll be plenty of people watching where he goes next, me very much included.
23, Elephant in the Room by Mick Jenkins.
Mick Jenkins' 2014 mixtape The Waters remains in my top 10 rap projects of that decade, which, for me and many others, gave his subsequent output a very tough act to follow. There are moments of perfection in all his albums, but on this year's Elephant in the Room, it felt like he finally brought it all together with a statement as good as his very best work. The beats are consistently masterful, the flow's solid, and the lyrics are socially conscious without losing their cool for a moment. It's everything that a modern hip-hop album should be. No doubt he'll remain the best rapper you've never heard of, but for those in the know, we feel very lucky to have Mick. I hope he keeps doing his thing for a long time to come.
22, The Off-Season by J. Cole.
The return of Jermaine Cole in 2021 was heralded with an incendiary radio freestyle, which saw the rapper hungrier than kids half his age on the come-up. The album that followed was a flawless demonstration of why he has a place in hip-hop's Mount Rushmore. The beats were impeccable, the flows were numerous and dizzying. Hell, he was even back with guests on a solo album for the first time since 2013. In some ways, the album almost suffered from being quite so good. There were no questionable choices that got people arguing, but just 40 minutes of Cole flowing effortlessly through braggadocio to family matters, riches to roots, without a single misstep to be found.
21, Talk Memory by Bad Bad Not Good.
We are in the middle of an incredible boom in fantastic modern jazz music. The UK has it great with the likes of Sons of Kemet, Use of Days, Ezra Collective and more, but the US has Bad Bad Not Good. I followed their music for years, particularly enjoying their hip-hop work, but on Talk Memory, they finally fully embraced the capital J jazz and have crafted a near-perfect rumination on everything that makes the genre a thrill, even over 100 years later. Kareem Riggins and Terrace Martin both pop up just to add serious heft to the album's credentials, but they don't need the help. Warm but wild, familiar but free, Bad Bad Not Good have ascended to a height that few can reach.
20, Conflict of Interest by Getz.
Not since Stormzy's debut has a UK rap album felt this blockbuster, this widescreen. Conflict of Interest shares more with Big Mike than just feature space. They both blend hard-nosed street rap stories with personal introspection and manage to show both aggression and vulnerability equally. The album is a who's who of the current scene, with Skepta, Dave, JK, Parsaloo and Giggs all showing up. But there's space for Emily Sande and Ed Sheeran too. Who knew he'd appear anywhere on this list? Getz is forever the star of his own show though, his inimitable flow cutting through every kind of beat. It's the sound of a man who's put in the time and earned his place on the throne.
19, We're All Alone in This Together by Dave.
It must have been hard to follow Psychodrama's Mercury Prize and Brit Awards wins, but after a 2-year break, Dave returned with an album just as vital as his debut. It's not hyperbole to call him the most important voice of young London. Dave is still spitting righteous venom for a country that doesn't care about people who look like him. This is best demonstrated on James Blake-produced 3 Rivers, which charts 3 generations of immigration in Britain. But it's the personal stories that cut deepest here. The sound of Dave's mother sobbing inconsolably at the end of 10-minute epic Heart Attack makes me break down every time I hear it.
18, The Melodic Blue by Baby Keem.
Keem's last album, Die For My Bitch, was my most listened to album in 2020. There was something about it that I just couldn't stop playing. There's a sweet spot that he inhabits between new school attitude and a dedication to real artistry, and on this project he continues to develop both. Sonically, the album moves at a breakneck speed, beat switching multiple times each song like an attention deficit. But listen closer and you can hear brand new ideas spilling out of every moment. Keane brings big cousin Kendrick Lamar and spiritual predecessor Travis Scott along for the ride, and more surprisingly Rosalia and Serpent with Feet too. But Keane is the star of the show throughout. Expect bright things to come.
17. Fever Dreams by Villagers.
I lost track of Villagers, aka Conor O'Brien, after his very good 2010 debut, largely I think because it came at the end of my major fixation with that alternative UK folk movement. It's been so long in fact that he's gone grey since I last listened to him, and I'm probably not that far behind now. I don't know how I ended up listening to his new album, but I'm so glad that I did. A lazy comparison might be to the Beatles, but Fever Dreams does have that same sense of mystical and enchanting allure that makes the title feel so apt. If you told me at the start of 2021 that a Villagers album would rocket into my top 20, I'd have never believed you. But I've really come to treasure this. It's a real album's album.
16. A Martyrs Reward by Carr.
What's immediately interesting about Carr's latest record is that he moved away from the conceptual writing that saw him assign an allegorical theme to every album since his 2013 sophomore. Long-time fans of the rap will recognise that the man doesn't need a central motif to tie his poetry together. His pen is as silencing as it's ever been. This time, the 49-year-old is reckoning with his place in society. The word monastic gets thrown at Carr by writers a lot, but A Martyr's Reward throws that right back in their faces with direct missives on cultural commodification, social responsibility, and the desperations of poverty. As the title suggests, he knows that there is a greater reward than universal recognition waiting for him, and he strives for it.
15. Sometimes I Might Be Introvert by Little Sims.
Simbi is quite simply the sound of an artist reaching the peak of her powers. Heralded by the godly single Introvert, it's obvious from the get-go that something important is unfolding. The full band on each song gives a huge sound to the album. Lyrically, she pulls off that awe-inspiring spectacle of straddling both intergenerational racial hurt as well as the intimately personal matters. Sims tackles gang violence and corrupt governments on one moment, then addresses her absent father and fractured relationship with her sister in the next. It's tempting to call her the female or the UK Kendrick Lamar in that way, but she really is her own artist, and this shows that the sky is now the limit.
14. By the Time I Get to Phoenix by Injury Reserve.
When news came last summer that Stepper J. Groggs, one-third of my favourite rap group, had passed away, I was absolutely devastated. He was a crucial voice in one of the most innovative and experimental forces in hip-hop, who were only just getting greater with time. The surviving members finished their final project without him and stayed true to his constant insistence while recording to simply make some weird shit. The result is an experience. It's one of the most sonically challenging records of the year, completely breaking free from genre and convention. But there is raw human emotion tying together the avant-garde, and it cuts deep. R.I.P. Groggs.
13. The Turning Wheel by Spelling.
Not since I first fell for Joanna Newsom or heard Kate Bush for the first time have I enjoyed being inside the world an artist conjures as much as this one. I heard early single Boys at School Somewhere by chance, and I made a note of the name and the release date of her album because I had a feeling it would be special, but listening through to the whole thing completely bowled me over. There are so many gorgeous twists and turns, like how Revolution suddenly turns on its heel halfway through and goes from lilting chamber pop into skiffling drums, blaring horns and urgent piano. It's an album brimming with these moments of wonder and delight, and there is nothing else like it this year.
12. For the First Time by Black Country New Road.
In 2021, Black Country New Road completely rekindled my love for new guitar bands. There's 7 of them, including a saxophonist and a violin player. They're young, they're daring, and crucially, they're pretty odd. Musically, they sound like Arcade Fire having a breakdown, or if Slint grew up frustrated in rural Cambridge. There's a frantic madness to the album, and frontman Isaac Wood acts as the ringleader of its unholy collapse. He has a deranged quality about him reminiscent of Marky Smith or David Byrne, and his confessional lyrics on Sunglasses in particular are what first hooked me. I'm on the edge of my seat for the song's full 10 minutes. And when he squawks, "I'm more than adequate," you really hear him cracking.
11. Sinner Get Ready by Lingua Ignota.
Some art elicits admiration more than enjoyment, and Lingua Ignota's music is an extreme example of that sensation. Sinner Get Ready could conceivably be categorised as death folk. The artist utilised rural instruments native to the Appalachian region where she lived while recording the album, and her impressive classical vocals unfurl in layers against mandolins, harpsichord, banjo, as she dresses herself in the traumatising cloak of the fanatical religious traditionalism. The result is quite unlike anything I've ever heard. Something like awakening to be found that you've been abducted by a cult. Listening from front to back really is an experience, and one that you need to take time to recover from before venturing into again.
10. I Lie Here Buried with My Rings and My Dresses by Backwash.
The top 10.
I was introduced to Backwash, transgender rapper from Zambia via Canada, through last year's Polaris Prize-winning album God Has Nothing to Do with This, Leave Him Out of It, and was not quick to forget her. Its follow-up is every bit as pummelling and even more terrifying. From the opening spoken sample of "The purpose of pain is to get our attention that something is wrong," it's in this sense that a little bit of pain is a good thing. You know what's to come is not going to be a breezy listen. The album's lyrics centre around addiction, depression, and the horrors of being in more than one of society's most oppressed and ostracised groups. When she wails "on the verge of losing my soul," you can really hear that she means it. The fact that clipping contributed production to one of the songs should give you an idea of the traumatic soundscapes on show here, but it's hard to say whether the instrumentals or the lyrics are more scary. Backwash's experience is horrifying, but we owe it to her to bear witness to her truth without cowering away.
9. Absolutely by Dijon.
Dijon's sound is hard to classify. The singles and EPs that preceded his debut album could all have been from different artists if it wasn't for one unifying factor: his voice. Somewhere between the soulful allure of Frank Ocean and the pop-leaning melodies of Ryan Beatty, it instantly pulls you in. Sonically, Absolutely reminds me of Bon Iver's 22 a Million, in that it is vaguely anchored in folk sensibilities in there somewhere, but every song does something new, inventive and magical with the format. You only have to glimpse some of the session videos he's been posting for each track to see the artistry and sheer musicianship that has gone into this record. Every song is a marvel, but the first time I heard Rodeo Clown, I teared up completely by surprise. The yearning and desperation in his cracking voice went through me like a hot knife. There's something special about the way Dijon writes, that even when you sense he's writing in character, the overwhelming passion in his delivery makes the stories universally relatable. A real late entry surprise for me.
8. Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler the Creator.
The last 5 years have been an explosion of creative evolution for Tyler the Creator. Cherry Bomb saw him take a left turn into lo-fi experimentation, Flower Boy had him open up about bisexuality, and Igor took him away from rapping altogether. In many ways, the next surprising thing he could do in 2021 was release a relatively straightforward hip-hop album, so of course that's what he did. Call Me When You Get Lost immediately makes a place for itself among rap heritage by having it hosted by legendary DJ Drama, whose Gangsta Grillz mixtapes have helped secure the legacies of Jeezy, Lil Wayne, Meek Mill and so many more. When lead single Lumberjack sampled Gravediggers, you knew he was back meaning business, and there are plenty of other songs here with knocking beats and bars on top of bars, but there are gorgeous instrumentals and singing too. The guest features all bring their A-game with unexpected star turns from the likes of Youngboy, NBA, 42 Doug and Tizo Touchdown, ensuring things never get boring for a second.
7. Deep England by Gazelle Twin and NYX.
In 2018, I watched Alex Garland's exceptional film Annihilation, and it really stuck with me, partly because of its singularly haunting score by Ben Salisbury and Portishead's Jeff Barrow. In 2019, I got that same uneasy and hypnotic feeling again from Holly Herndon's Proto album, and this year it reached me once more with electronic drone choir NYX's reconstructions of Gazelle Twin's 2018 Pastoral album, which challenged the notion of British jingoism against the backdrop of rising fascism. NYX takes the source material and, using an orchestra of gasps, sighs, wails and screams, gives the project a truly terrifying new mutation. The result is like getting lost in the countryside, the trees and branches coming to life to strangle you. It's completely immersive to the point of suffocation. Having moved to a self-described medieval market town at the start of this year, I felt like I had the perfect backdrop against which to really experience the record, and it made a huge impact on me. Try it if you dare. You'll never want to leave the city again.
6. When Smoke Rises by Mustafa.
Sometimes an album doesn't need to be doing anything showy or loud to completely capture your attention. Mustafa knows this, and the 8 songs on his short debut album are like hushed hymnals, ushering loved ones through safe passage to the next life. The 25-year-old poet-turned-singer hails from downtown Toronto's infamous Regent Park neighbourhood. Born to Sudanese parents, he grew up as part of the local hip-hop collective Halal Gang, but in 2018, one of its members, Smoke Dogg, was shot and killed outside a nightclub. His loss casts a long shadow over the album, not least on the title and cover, and it's clear that Mustafa is heavily impacted by the premature deaths of several friends and relatives through violence. His voice works like a balm, attempting to bring peace both to the dead and the living left behind. Stay Alive acts as a plea to the latter, while Ali and What About Heaven both deal directly with the process of grief. It's telling that both James Blake and Sampha worked on the record, as this feels like the passing of the mantle to someone really special.
5. Agor by Corliss.
When you've waited a full decade for an artist's debut album to come out, and it's somehow still shockingly good, you know that you're dealing with something special. Corliss first blew my 20-year-old mind with a double A-side on small electronic label Pictures Music in the midst of the post-dubstep boom. Between then and this year, he's had about 3 official releases, but the slow drip of YouTube rips from DJ sets hinted that his best work was still yet to come. This reached fever pitch for me with the appearance of Joy Squad in various mixes, which I played to death and yet still blows my mind to hear in its rightful place on this brilliant album. Like the album's cover, the music on Agor, which is Welsh for open, captures the fascinating intersection between organic and synthetic, natural and unnatural. The sound palettes throughout are unmistakably electronic, man-made, but the breathy vocal samples carefully woven through the music give the technology a sort of living, feeling sentience that makes the album feel really hypnotic. I only wish there was more of it.
4. Carnage by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis.
In 2019, I named Nick Cave's Ghosteen my album of the year. After Skeleton Tree was tainted by the tragic loss of Cave's son, Ghosteen faced it head-on with poise, intimacy and devotion. For this year's Carnage, Cave shed all the bad seeds but his closest, multi-instrumentalist Warren Ellis. But this was a red herring for those expecting a more intimate approach. In fact, his latest is more expansive, animated and big-sounding than anything he's produced for years. For this album, Cave focuses once again on the wider world, with lockdowns and protests, each anchoring the music in the here and now. The album's centre point and longest song, White Elephant, is absolutely incendiary, about as far away from the ethereal haze of Ghosteen as you could get. But Cave is still deeply introspective too, as well as romantic. The couplet, "There's a madness in her and a madness in me, and together it forms a kind of sanity," is probably the most beautiful lyric I've heard all year. On Carnage, the artist sounds ready to look ahead again, and upwards towards the sky.
3. Actual Life 1 and 2 by Fred Again.
Much like the Ranger's Potential, or Burial's discography before that, Fred Again is part of a lineage of producers who can hear something in the ordinary snippets of conversation or hummed, half-sung melody and transform it into transcendent and stunning pieces of music. Fred has previously worked with everyone from Ed Sheeran to Stormzy, but many of the most touching moments on his 2 solo albums released this year come from spoken word artists the producer found on Instagram, or simply a friend singing a lullaby to a newborn baby. There's vulnerability and a deep empathy that runs through the record, which felt so rare this year. I Am a Party captures mania and anxiety with striking accuracy, while Deep Diving is the sound of gently falling in love. Of course, We've Lost Dancing was the big hit and is a highlight. No other song this year really broke through the hopelessness like this one did. It offered what we needed most in the cold lockdown of February 2021, complete abandon and sweet human connection.
2. Donda by Kanye West.
As with much of Kanye's post-Yeezus work, there is a lot wrong with Donda. A bonus track featuring Marilyn Manson, accused of assault, abuse and worse. The album is over an hour and 3/4 long with weird sequencing and songs that just don't fit. And on top of it all, what started as a tribute to his late mother ended up as a dumb sales war with Drake. So why can't I stop listening to it, even after the dust has settled? I quit being a Kanye apologist around 2018, so it can't be blind devotion. All I can say is that the album, warts and all, came to me right when I needed it most, and many of the songs have buoyed me, comforted me, and in some ways rescued me. The child in me who was raised in church is lifted by the beautiful gospel throughout, something only fleetingly achieved from his previous album. The rap fan in me is thrilled with Kanye's best songwriting and most restless sonic experimentation in years, and the father and husband in me is moved by his honesty and his struggle. What can I say? He's still a genius, even now.
1. For Those I Love by For Those I Love.
For anyone whose best friends have been their most permanent, unmoving support in their lives, this is a deeply moving album. One that stops you in your tracks and shakes you to the core. With a stunning deftness of hand, it forces the listener to reckon with brotherhood, grief and self-destruction in ways that I can't recall any other album ever having done. But more amazingly, it often does it in a way that you can dance to. From the same catharsis by Euphoria playbook that producers such as Jamie XX and Caribou draw from, For Those I Love has crafted something both weighty and weightless in equal measure. It feels like the kind of statement an artist can only make once. And if that is the case, I'm so glad that he did. I implore anyone who listens to music in order to feel something to block out 46 minutes and just sit and live with this absolutely singular collection of songs. But before you do, check in on your mates and tell them how much you love them. Phew! That's it! My top 50 albums of 2021. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. This was my first proper video and it was quite a labour of love. As a keen-eyed among you could probably tell, I didn't do it all in one sitting. But yeah, there'll be more to come. I'm hoping to follow this up with films of the year. I know we're into mid-January now, but I still feel like it'd be something cool to sort of kick the channel off with. So anyway, keep tuned in for loads more music videos this year. I'm looking at album reviews, I'm looking at deep dives into certain discographies, all kinds of stuff. And if, of course, there's anything missing from this list that you think that I would like based on what you've seen here, I pray you put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them and I'm always open to recommendations. Yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys soon.